Good afternoon and welcome colleagues and honored guests to the release of State of Baby's Yearbook 2022. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Miriam Calderon. I am the Chief Policy Officer at 0 to 3, and I have the privilege of presenting to you the 4th edition of our State of Baby's Yearbook, a valuable source of data for policymakers, advocates, and partners. It provides a snapshot of how our babies and families are faring and the policy gaps we need to address so that all of our babies, the future workers, innovators, and leaders of this nation, are born healthy and thriving by age 3. Telling the story of babies is more important than ever. Our nation is grappling with, for the 3rd consecutive year, with the impacts of the pandemic that has worsened inequities for babies and families of color and with low incomes. Yet our nation's policymakers appear poised to move on without establishing the broad, permanent, family-focused policies that babies and families need to survive, recover, and prosper. As the 2022 yearbook shows, states continue to make progress to enact policies that positively impact child and family well-being. However, ensuring equitable opportunities for all babies and families in every community in this country requires nothing short of immediate national action. The State of Babies in 2022 is a call to action for our national leaders to finally take the bold steps to make babies a priority. Before we begin, I want to share a quick note about our agenda for this call. We are honored to bring you remarks from Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, Chair of the House Appropriations Committee, and Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, Chair of the Senate Subcommittee on Children and Families, 2 members of Congress who have been steadfast champions for this country's babies. These leaders will provide their perspectives on why understanding the story of babies is more important than ever. We are also honored to be joined later in the program by 3 parent advocates who have represented their states in 0 to 3's annual Strolling Thunder events, where parents meet with their members of Congress to share what it's like to raise a baby in this country and urge them to think babies. These moms will talk about their family's experiences and share with you what they want Congress to know and act on. I also want to let you know that we will not be holding a formal question and answer period during this webinar, but we do invite you to put your questions in the chat and someone from our team will answer them live. And if we don't get to your question, we will provide an email address for follow-up after the event. All right, let's get started. I'm going to now turn to Representative Rosa DeLauro, a longstanding champion for babies and families and founder of the Congressional Baby Caucus.
Hello, this is Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, representing Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District. I want to thank 0 to 3 for releasing their 2022 State of Baby's Yearbook. 2022 Yearbook's findings make it clear economic insecurity and barriers to resources in these communities remain at the root of so many inequities that persist in our country. Without action, we should not expect these patterns to change dramatically in the near future. Hardworking families deserve robust, long-term policies that will promote significant changes to ensure all babies reach their full potential. We must prioritize and enact a bold working families agenda. Far too many families are being left behind as the challenges of meeting their economic needs and accessing critical supports such as childcare escalate. And given that the expanded and improved child tax credit, a policy I have championed for nearly 20 years, was allowed to lapse, casting millions of children into poverty or deeper into poverty, while comprehensive child care investments are on the precarious footing, the plight of families today is a policy choice that must be reversed. And as my favorite economist and Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Joseph Stiglitz says, and I quote, "Inequality is not inevitable. It is about the public policy choices we make." That is why I have long believed that one such choice we have is enhancing our safety net and investing in policies that can address inequities and lift millions of children and families out of poverty. It is not just the right thing to do, but necessary for creating a more resilient and equitable economic future. We have an opportunity to make a real difference for families in every state We must seize it. As chair of the House Appropriations Committee, you have my word that I will continue working to do everything possible to get our children and their families the resources they need as we continue recovering from this pandemic and far beyond. I know from watching my own grandchildren that our kids are resilient and precious. They are my joy and hope, a true gift. And fighting for them puts purpose in my steps and light in my heart. So let us continue amplifying their needs and their voices. And with that, I want to thank you again for inviting me to join you for this year's unveiling of 0 to 3's State of Babies Yearbook. I am proud to be your partner, and I look forward to continuing working to promote good health, strong families, and positive early learning experience for all our babies and toddlers.
Where a baby, I apologize, I was muted. So I wanted to say that, again, we so appreciate those powerful words from Representative Rosa DeLauro. The State of Babies 2022 yearbook once again underscores the significance of where a baby is born and lives as a key factor and whether they have a strong start in life. Even more than the apparent geographic differences, the yearbook findings continue to demonstrate the disparate experiences among babies of different races, ethnicities, and income levels, with inequity starting even before birth. Even in states where babies overall are doing better and there has been more progress to enact exemplary policies, these disparities persist. Economic insecurity and systemic racism remain at the root of many inequities in the child and family indicators presented in the yearbook. And the data show that the hardships exacerbated by the pandemic continue to take an emotional toll on both parents and children, reminding us that while there may be a collective longing to move on, millions of families with babies in our nation do not have that privilege. Our objective for each edition of the yearbook is to ensure the data provided helps policymakers, advocates, and partners understand that too many babies face risks that can undermine development and therefore their ability to reach their potential. In other words, what to pay attention to. The data also can help policymakers think strategically about progress over time and what actions that can be taken to create meaningful and sustainable change in the conditions for all families with young children. The 2022 State of Babies Yearbook presents data on more than 60 indicators of well-being and 3 domains that are essential for every baby to thrive: good health, strong families, and positive early learning experiences. The data and indicator analysis in the yearbook are powered by our partners at Child Trends. Our indicators are drawn from the latest national data sets that include information from every state, the District of Columbia, and for the first time, Puerto Rico. These large national data sets still reflect pre-pandemic data. So we have once again supplemented the 2022 yearbook with national data collected through the Rapid Survey Project, formerly at the University of Oregon and now at Stanford University. This partnership helps to bring the perspective and voices of families to help us understand how families with babies are faring during the pandemic. The 2022 yearbook also continues to use a transparent ranking process to group states into one of 4 tiers called GROW to better understand how child and family well-being and exemplary policies compare across the states. Because this country lacks national level policies that consistently advance the health, development, and basic economic well-being of babies and families, there is tremendous variation in where states place their policy priorities. This contributes not only to differences between states in how families with babies are supported, but to significant disparities. The GROW ranking provides the means for easy comparison of the progress being made in states especially in the absence of a comprehensive national policy agenda. There are 11.4 million infants and toddlers in the United States, more than half of whom are babies of color, and all of whom are born with unlimited potential. Unfortunately, our nation is not poised to build on the rich diversity of our babies and families. Structural racism and inadequate wage structures continue to enforce economic inequity for babies of color. Overall, 40% of babies in the United States are born into families living in poverty or with low income, compared to 63% of American Indian Alaska Native babies, 61% of Black infants and toddlers, and 55% of Hispanic infants and toddlers. Physical and emotional health are inextricably linked, and inequities can be present even before birth. Providing for a baby's well-being must begin in the critical prenatal period, and it starts with the health of the mother. To have a healthy pregnancy and positive birth outcomes, mothers need access to appropriate healthcare services before, during, and after pregnancy. Despite the clear need, 12 states haven't yet adopted Medicaid expansions that have been associated with lower rates of infant mortality, among other outcomes. Good health also requires continuous and consistent access to quality health services for babies and toddlers, and the data make clear the need for stronger policies to address inequities. More than 5% of babies in families with low income are uninsured, which means they do not receive the healthcare they need at critical moments. Wide variations in coverage appear across states, ranging from less than 1% of babies with low income uninsured in Vermont to almost 18% uninsured in North Dakota. The yearbook continues to show striking disparities in mental health when examined by race, ethnicity, especially for Black and Native American women. Let's first look at prenatal care. Though just over 6% of women receive late prenatal care or no prenatal care at all, mothers of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander descent are 3 times more likely than the national average to receive late or no care. And American Indian and Alaska Native women are 2 times more likely. Alarmingly, maternal mortality rates are rising, up from 17 pregnancy-related deaths per 100,000 live births in 2021 to a national average of 20 per 100,000 live births. The rates of death among Black mothers is more than double the national average. In the words of a parent leader, "I paid out of my pocket to have a Black doula so I could have the best chance of staying alive while giving birth." Given the troubling indicators for maternal health, we are not surprised that negative birth outcomes remain relatively unchanged from previous yearbooks, and that significant disparities by race and ethnicity persist. A look at 2 indicators, preterm births and low birth weight, show much higher rates for Black babies compared to the national average. Changes in both infant and maternal health will require intentional policies that address healthcare access, bias encountered during treatment, and the cumulative effects of racism-related stress for babies and mothers of color. Just as the physical health of mothers and babies are intertwined, so is the mental health of babies and their mothers. Mothers report less than optimal well-being that can create developmental risk for their babies. More than 1 in 5 mothers with babies reported less than optimal mental health, an increase from the 2021 yearbook. And mothers of infants and toddlers with families with low income were more likely to rate their mental health as less optimal than mothers in families with higher incomes. The effects of the pandemic on families' emotional well-being continues to be a cause for concern. Although emotional distress was experienced at slightly lower levels than seen in the pandemic's first year, it remained higher than before COVID. And we know that when families' lives are more stressful, this can translate into emotional distress for babies. Rapid survey data in 2021 showed that the levels of distress of caregivers and babies rose and fell in a similar pattern over the course of the year, and that the rates remain more unpredictable by race and ethnicity. Young children develop in the context of their families, where stability, safety, and supportive relationships and environments nurture their growth. Babies remain the age group most likely to live in families with low income and in poverty, with much higher rates for babies and families of color. Consequently, as our indicators will show, babies and families without adequate income are more likely to experience conditions that can undermine their development. As a nation, we have consistently failed to provide families with the supports they need to provide for their babies' most basic needs. Many of the indicators in this domain remain relatively unchanged from previous yearbooks. However, the enhanced child tax credit, temporarily enacted in response to the pandemic and allowed to expire at the end of 2021, provides a powerful demonstration for the efficacy of bold policy at the national level. Child poverty decreased by 30%. Families were able to purchase more nutritious food, pay rent, and keep the lights on, and even spend more time with their children. What a gift it is to be able to focus on building the bonds that will last children a lifetime. Now let's look at two indicators that have shown the link between economic challenges and the conditions that can undermine healthy development. Let's begin with crowded housing, which is defined as homes where many people live in close quarters. The yearbook findings indicate that crowded housing remains unchanged when looking at pre-pandemic data. Nearly 1 in 6 babies were living in crowded housing, but when considering income, the number increases to nearly 1 in 4 babies. Once again, we also see stark differences evident by race and ethnicity. For example, 20% of Hispanic infants and toddlers live in crowded housing, nearly twice the national average. Crowded housing has been associated with children's health problems, including respiratory conditions, injuries, infectious diseases, as well as with young children's food insecurity. So now let's take a look at food insecurity. Nearly 15% of the nation's household with babies experienced food insecurity before the pandemic, representing an increase from the 2021 yearbook findings. Once again, our findings show stark disparities by race, ethnicity, with particularly high rates of food insecurity among American Indian, Alaska Native, and Black households with babies at more than twice the national average. COVID-19 has only increased food insecurity for families across the country. Families with low income reported insecurity at approximately 5 times higher rates than those with higher incomes. Research shows a relationship between a lack of nutritious food and several serious health, behavioral, and cognitive deficits in young children. The yearbook's findings on families' pandemic experiences continue to show stress, anxiety, and depression among caregivers, as well as the relationship between caregiver emotional distress and financial hardship. Rapid data show that more than half of caregivers that reported extreme financial hardship experienced emotional distress, compared to about a third of caregivers that reported no financial hardship. This year's rapid data also show links between household level financial hardship and emotional distress for both caregivers and their children. Clearly, families feel tested by the pandemic, and many have felt the stress rising as material hardship has increased. Strolling Thunder families tell us that they often don't feel supported or even seen. The cost of raising a child in this country leave them feeling constantly behind financially. Positive early learning experiences are essential for healthy child development and can also be a critical family support. Pre-pandemic data showed that a growing number of babies spent time in care outside of their family. This demonstrates that access to affordable quality care remains an essential need for families, particularly for mothers that want or need to re-enter or stay in the workforce. As important, early childhood educators and caregivers have a significant impact on the learning and development of babies. We can no longer ignore that their levels of stress, economic well-being, and work conditions are critical ingredients for quality care. We must do more to support this workforce so that they can thrive alongside the babies in their care. The yearbook data shows that families started to return to the regular use of childcare last year. Nationally, 53% of families were using non-parental care in January of 2021, compared to 66% in December. But this return was much lower among families with low incomes. At the start of 2021, 50% of families with low income had returned to non-parental care. And by December, only 60% of families with low income had returned to care. This is a result of continued job losses among these families and a collapsing childcare market that has decreased the supply of care providers despite demand. Our childcare system is faltering, held up only by temporary boosts from the American Rescue Plan. Low wages and elevated emotional distress are driving early educators out of the field. Care has become even more scarce and out of reach for many parents, even more so than before the pandemic. Right now, our country is not doing what it could to ensure families have the support they need, nor is it helping children get access to or even an assurance of high-quality early care and learning settings. Before the pandemic, the childcare market was buoyed by the compassion of caregivers alone and fueled and funded mostly by families. Now, in these uncertain economic times, Congress must intervene, not just to stabilize the market, but also ensure equitable opportunities for all families to access developmentally appropriate care. It's time to stop forcing families to choose between economic security and the well-being of their children. Before the pandemic, childcare represented a huge percentage of most family budgets. In most states, childcare constitutes more than a third of a single parent's income. But even though childcare is prohibitively expensive for most families, little financial assistance is available to them. If we look at families with low or moderate income, those who would benefit the most, only a tiny percentage, less than 5%, receive childcare development fund assistance. The first years of a baby's life are the most significant for brain development. Babies make 1 million neural connections every second. Early care and learning programs help shape this critical period by creating an environment and experiences that foster healthy social, emotional development and learning. Babies cannot make up for lost time. They need action on a national vision for high-quality infant and toddler programs to support their growth. We view Early Head Start as that gold standard. It provides a two-generation approach that can begin in the prenatal period and has proven benefits for child development. The Yearbook uses Early Head Start standards as a benchmark for examining the quality floors that states set for childcare. Unfortunately, states set quality floors that rarely achieve this level. As we approach nearly 30 years since the creation of Early Head Start, the program still only has space for 11% of income-eligible infants and toddlers. With a more robust investment, we could give all babies the developmental support they need to thrive. In the words of a parent leader, before COVID, I worked a minimum wage job, 40 hours a week at our local grocery store. After each of my daughters was born, I had to quit work as we could not afford childcare. We faced many difficulties living on one paycheck. During the pandemic, Congress responded to families with bold emergency policies. As a result of their efforts, many families had access to the resources necessary to buffer the harshest effects of COVID-19. But these were only temporary solutions, many of which have expired, leaving families to fend for themselves. The pangs that families felt were not new, but rather have been compounded and are far from temporary. Worrisome signs before the pandemic tell us that families will not just bounce back to some previous level that was considered tolerable, even knowing that level was fundamentally unacceptable for many, particularly families of color with low income, as well as new immigrants and refugees. As we enter year 3 of COVID-19, we still lack the permanent policies that would position families to succeed long-term. Now, more than ever, we need a big, bold, permanent baby agenda. We stand behind the president and baby champions in Congress who are ready to move forward with transformational policies that will benefit every baby and family. Here are our baby's top priorities at the federal level. Our childcare system is near collapse, and families are mostly on their own to cover the costs, together with providers who often work for poverty-level wages. We need a robust investment in comprehensive childcare now to ensure families are no longer forced to choose between safe, quality care and their livelihood. A high proportion of babies live in economically precarious conditions, even before the pandemic. The enhanced child tax credit brought nearly half of these babies and families out of poverty. But now that they have been plunged back into an intentional recession, making the child tax credit permanent and fully refundable would benefit more than 90% of infants and toddlers. Congress can and should act to extend this credit and make it refundable so that families in the greatest need have access to the material supports that they need for their babies to thrive. Strong emotional connections beginning at birth last a lifetime. A permanent paid family and medical leave program that almost all industrialized countries have would provide a crucial support for families, not just for bonding with their infants, but for caring for children and older adults with serious illnesses as well. And finally, we must tackle the health disparities for mothers and babies that are apparent even in the highest tier states in our rankings. For starters, we need to expand Medicaid coverage for 12 months postpartum, place child development specialists in pediatric primary care, as well as build infant and toddler early childhood mental health capacity to better reach parents and babies. We must close the coverage gap in states that haven't adopted Medicaid expansion. We urge Congress to take heed of the state of our nation's babies, because regardless of politics, babies' brain development is moving ahead with all deliberate speed, and the person they will become is rapidly taking shape. The data show us that too many babies are experiencing conditions that threaten their potential, despite the best efforts and resiliency of their families and caregivers. We must enact a bold agenda that ensures babies and families are not left behind, because without them, our future is not secure. I'm now excited to turn it over to Senator Casey from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to hear some words about the state of play for our babies at the federal level and a vision for going forward. Followed by Senator Casey, my colleague Amanda Perez will take the reins and introduce our panel of Strolling Thunder parent advocates.
Let me start by thanking 0 to 3 for your good work and effective advocacy to support children and families all across the nation. The data provided by the State of Baby's Yearbook is invaluable to members of the House and the Senate and our staffs as we work to ensure that all children, regardless of zip code or family background, are provided the support they need to be healthy and successful in life. The research is irrefutable. When kids learn more now, they earn more later. Every dollar invested in high-quality early care and education yields $3 to $7 in return over the long run. Early learning and childcare are also important because they enable parents to work and support their families. Yet the high cost of childcare imposes significant burdens on working families, leading many parents to work less, to turn down promotions, or even drop out of the labor force entirely. Ultimately, the rising cost of childcare not only hits the bottom line of millions of families, but it's also a drag on the national economy. I'm proud to be one of the senators leading the charge to increase federal investments in childcare and early learning. In fiscal year 2022, we saw historic levels of funding for Head Start and the Child Care and Development Block Grant. These investments have a significant impact on the state of Pennsylvania and our nation, but we have a long way to go. Between the high cost of quality care and the limited subsidies, many child care providers operate with very thin margins, unable to pay their workers and the wages they deserve. That's why I introduced and co-sponsored numerous pieces of legislation that would make high-quality child care affordable and accessible for working families, while also improving wages for child care workers. I'm a proud co-sponsor of the bill that Senator Patty Murray has been working on for years with us, the Child Care for Working Families Act. Here's just 3 examples of what that bill would do. Number 1, help families pay for child care and ensure that no parent pays more than 7% of their income on child care. Second, this bill would support universal access to high-quality pre-K programs for all 3 and 4-year-olds. And third, the bill would ensure that all child care workers are paid a living wage, and early childhood educators are provided parity with elementary school teachers with similar credentials and experience. In addition to this legislation, I've proposed my 5 freedoms for America's children, a comprehensive proposal to secure the blessings of liberty for children of today and tomorrow. One of my 5 freedoms is the freedom to learn. As part of this proposal, I call for an additional $25 billion annually to expand affordable childcare and early learning programs, and a substantial permanent expansion of the child and dependent care tax credit to cover up to half of the cost of childcare for working families. This tax credit is known by the shorthand the Child Care Credit, as distinguished from the Child Tax Credit, which is another tax credit, of course, that we should expand and make permanent. But this Child Care Credit was enhanced in the American Rescue Plan, which allowed millions of families to receive up to $4,000 per child and up to $8,000 per family to help pay for the cost of child care expenses. At a time when family budgets are being squeezed by inflation, this was much needed relief that families are receiving this year. Now we need to make this version of the child care tax credit permanent. That's the right thing to do for our children and our nation. When it comes to our children, we've got to dream big and we've got to shoot high to truly make progress for our children and for the future of our workforce. So thank you all for your enduring commitment and your hard work in the fight for the health, well-being, and educational success of all children. I look forward to continuing to work with you as we work together on these critical issues in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Thank you very much.
So great to hear from Senator Casey, who has been such a devoted champion for young children over the years. We've heard the data. Now we want to hear some of the family experiences behind that data. And I am so privileged to be here today with 3 families who will share a little bit of their experience over the past few years with all of us. I want them to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their families. Devaney, I am wondering if you could turn on that camera and start us off.
So it's not letting me start my camera. I think the host has to put it on.
Oh dear. Okay, well, we'll try and work on that technical aspect. But Devaney, can you describe this picture to us and who's here?
Yes, so this is my family. This little one is my 2-year-old Khaleesi, my very wild 2-year-old. We are from a small town called Dexter, New Mexico, where I am a stay-at-home mother with her.
So glad to see you here, Devaney. Thank you for being here. Pascal.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Pascal from Louisiana, and these are my beautiful children. One is not pictured in here. So I have 7 kids. 2 are on the spectrum, and so they require in-home specialized care. And I have 2 toddlers, and I'm so happy to be here.
We're glad to have you, Pascal. Thank you. And Alice.
Hey everybody, I'm Alice. I'm an educator, originally from Cleveland. I live in Columbus, Ohio. In this picture, my husband, Alex, my older son, Sage, who's 4 years old, and then my younger son is Jasper, and he'll be 2 on May 10, just a week.
Oh my gosh, it happened so fast, right? So we have three very different families from three very different parts of the country, with three very different communities, experiences, the whole shebang. You all have been listening to the data here on State of Babies, and I'm wondering from each of you, tell me one thing that struck you. And Devaney, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think, just having this data is such an important, thing for families. It's such a powerful resource to have. And I hope it's a real eye opener to all.
Yeah, thank you. For advocates of all kinds, family advocates, as well as folks out in the field who are listening and folks in Congress. Yeah, for sure. And others. Pascal.
Hi, yeah. I forgot to mention I am a parent partner mentor in my state, so I work in child welfare. And so with that being said, what struck me was the fact that I work on the front line and I see exactly what's happening to families. And and the data is definitely the proof. And like Devaney said, it's very serious right now, and I hope that Congress does take it serious as well.
So you're seeing that the data is really reflective of what you're seeing in your community.
Yes, ma'am. Since the CTC stopped, there's been a rise in investigations, reports, children being removed, placed in foster care. And, personally working there and seeing what's in the plans, a lot of it springs from poverty, and I can go even deeper into it, like with mental health and, stuff like that. So, but yeah, there's been a rise.
In limited time, we can only do so much, but that perspective is really helpful as we're thinking about what families are experiencing. Alice.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was just I was really disappointed. I think that even with this data, you can see how clearly the pandemic really laid bare all of these different inequities that we have in our systems. We already needed a stronger system of childcare. We already needed a stronger system of healthcare and all of these things. And we had such a great opportunity because it became extremely obvious to just about everybody. And then it was backed up by these data, right? But to see how temporary a lot of the fixes were and to see the lack of commitment to that long-term structural change was really disappointing for me.
Yeah, and that's a huge takeaway for all of us, I think, today as we're listening to you all talk and listening to this data. Miriam talked about how what families need, as you're talking about that, Alice, what families need is good, or for their children, is good health, strong families, and positive early learning experiences. And I think we're going to have a chance to talk about all three of those things, but let's start with good health. And Devaney, I'm wondering if we can start with you. You found out that you were pregnant with Khaleesi just before the pandemic. How did you plan for your baby?
Yeah, so, prior, I had been a cosmetologist for about 7 years. Finding out I was pregnant with Khaleesi, I knew I was going to have to work super hard in the next coming months to save as much money as I could to be able to take a little bit of time off when I had her. So that was the plan. And unfortunately, I went into preterm labor at 6 months. So Khaleesi was born at 25 weeks gestational. She was only 1 pound, 11 ounces. So since that day forward, I haven't gone back to work. I'm home with her, dealing with her medical needs 24/7.
Yeah, you're really caring for her. As you do that, we'll hear a little bit more about that. Okay. And that continues for your family. You continue to do that continuous care for her. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like?
Well, she is immunocompromised. So we are pretty much stuck in our bubble, with this very ongoing pandemic. We aren't really able to get out and do much, be around people. She gets sick pretty often, and we are from a very small town, and the hospital that is closest to us is a few hours away. So we are there quite often. She is also enrolled in an EI program. So we do therapy several times a week. and, just back and forth to doctor's appointments. So that is what our lives consist of.
Yeah, really busy, busy, busy. Alice, I know that you had some frustration with healthcare as well in the last couple of
Yeah,
years.
yes. We've had, so initially when my son needed an inhaler, even though we did have some healthcare coverage through a job, it was still just the piecemeal nature of the insurance, of what's covered, what's not, which doctor you can go to, which doctor you can't go to. Just long story short, my older son needed an inhaler, and initially the insurance didn't cover the inhaler. So then when we got to the pharmacy, it was over $200 for this inhaler, which is an ongoing thing, right? So then we ended up getting a supplemental plan, and then it dropped the price of the inhaler to like 150 or something like that. So just even with insurance, sometimes it can be an astronomical cost to getting something that's a preventative and potentially life-saving medication, so that's just one example of a frustration that I had recently with healthcare system. Even being insured, it's still been a struggle at times.
Yeah, yeah. And we know that with that, there comes, and sort of the other elements that are happening for families, there comes, as Miriam said, that mental health issue that can come up, that stress can really feed into some mental health kinds of things. And Devaney, I wonder if you could talk about that. You said that COVID in particular was really rough on you emotionally.
Right, Amanda. So mental health has been a very big issue for me. Here is my immunocompromised baby. Like I said, in the middle of this pandemic, I've felt so trapped inside of my own home, just very scared to leave and be susceptible to anything that's out there. So yeah, I've struggled with that a lot recently. Thankfully, we've been able to move closer to my family, who has been a really big help with that. So for that, I am thankful.
Yeah, I know you moved back home, and that's so wonderful that you're able to do that. And at the same time, that moved you away from the hospital a little bit farther, right? A couple of those other things that you had to make some of those decisions about how to support your family in that. Yeah. So one of the other things that Miriam said is that the financial stress and mental health are really related. And that's one of the things that was found through Rapid EC and is included in the State of Babies. When we talk about strong families, we know that economics is key, but the data is really clear that for families with young children, COVID has really undermined that level of economic security. And we've seen that in a lot of different ways. Pascal, can you tell us a little bit about your story there?
Yeah, so as y'all seen, I have 7 kids, so you can imagine during COVID, when school sort of opened back up, how many calls I got from the school because my son sneezed or, anything like that, and having to go not only take one child out of school, but take all children out of school, right? And no one can go back till they had negative COVID testing. And so it was a real strain on my family, because, my husband and I were both working, and during the pandemic, he got laid off. We had struggled with accessing unemployment, and even SNAP. We applied for that, but I was just at the amount where we didn't qualify. So it was a struggle. And so, but luckily, my governor in our state did pass a waiver during the pandemic because, like I mentioned, I had 2 kids with disabilities and required nurses at our home. And it made it to where families could work with their children, and that was a great relief for us. And so my husband and I sat down, and had a conversation about what was more important to us and our family at the time, and we made a decision that we would, enroll in that self-direct with our sons, and he would stay home and be the caretaker for our kids, which eliminated a ton of stress on our entire family. I mean, it not that he made more money staying home. He absolutely doesn't. But during this crisis that's happening in our country, I mean, we had to do what we had to do, and so that's been the financial issue that's still ongoing, and like the CTC credit did help, it helped with during that time, him trying to go back to work prior to getting the waiver. we were able to access childcare. It was affordable for us because of the CTC credit. However, when it stopped, it was, we could no longer do that. And so now what it looks like is just we're at home still, and I work, in the field, but I also work on, virtually. So I can still, we feel the impacts of it continuing to go on, and we're just trying to, get through this as a family.
It's really been striking to me working with the three of you, but also working with families across the country this year, the numbers of choices that families are having to make between a not great situation and another not great situation. And really the way that that is just such a thin line about how they're trying to make those decisions, especially economic decisions right now. Alice, I think all of you spoke about that really common and uncomfortable place where you make too much to qualify for supports that are available, but too little to really make ends meet. And Alice, I know you talked about that too.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's an ongoing struggle. I personally have to pay a lot out of pocket for childcare. I do know folks who do qualify for childcare assistance, but it's still so much of their income. So for me, as far as all of our expenses, and we're not astronomical spenders at all, but it's about a third of everything that we have to pay for just childcare. Previously in prior jobs, it's been almost half. So just having the child tax credit was very helpful in making a little bit more of a cushion, but still just thinking about, where I was when I first found out that I was pregnant, I was a student. I knew there was no way after visiting child care centers, and it's $800 a month, $1,000 a month or more. I knew there was no way that I would be able to afford it then. And now that we technically can, it's still an uncomfortable area to be in. I think that has been an ongoing struggle of just the sheer cost of it.
Yeah, the cost, but also the quality. I mean, I think that as we're talking about positive early learning experiences, we want that high quality, affordable childcare for every family. And the way that all of you have talked about that, Devaney, I know that you had done some thinking about that before Khaleesi was born, that there is that sort of, how do you decide? How do you make the best of that situation where you are? Let's see, I know, Pascal, see that a lot in the families that you're working with right now, that you're seeing a lot of issues around childcare in particular. Did you have, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say yes, definitely. Like I said, I work with that population of families that are going through some disasters in their life. So yeah, there's definitely economic issues that stem from that too. So yes, definitely.
Yeah. Let's see. So we've talked about those three things. We've talked about good health. We've talked about strong families. We've talked about positive early learning experiences. We have a few minutes left. I am wondering what the three of you want your policymakers to take away from this event, and what you and the data tell us about raising young children in 2022. And Devaney, I am wondering if we can start with you. What do you want your policymaker to take away, Devaney?
Yes, so, I'd really like my policymakers to understand that, yes, paid leave is important to have, but we need to always keep in mind that unfortunate events always happen. They do happen. They happen for a lot of families, and it's crucial to have a medical paid leave to rely on. In the very least, to take some of the financial burden off.
So both paid family and medical leave for families across the country. Yeah.
Right.
Pascal, what would you add there? What would you tell your members of Congress?
Yeah, I agree with Devaney, and also, like the CTC credit would be very important to implement that again, and also the child care credit would be great. I would so appreciate the 7% having to pay, because I'd rather my child be in an area being learning and becoming more fruitful than being at home. And so I would love for them to, to take it serious. And, these are our lives, our children's lives. And this is what's really going on. And just to, and like I said, the families I work with, I would rather see prevention, more prevention, and that's definitely prevention from having
Yeah,
a families apart.
yeah, thank you. Alice, what would you say?
I would just reiterate the importance of listening to families. I think that making sure that even if a policymaker has not personally gone through the situation of having to choose between getting a job that pays a couple more dollars an hour and losing their food benefits or losing their childcare benefits, even if they have not personally experienced that, I think it's important to realize how many people are in that predicament. I have plenty of friends and connections that have been in that situation. And I think it's just really important to listen to the people who are actually going through the thing while they are trying to shape these different policies, and to keep those folks in mind. And also just the importance of affordable childcare and high quality childcare. I can say that as a parent and also as an educator, I've worked in elementary schools, I've worked in daycare settings, and it's so important. There is such a huge difference when somebody is able to be exposed to those learning experiences, and it shouldn't have to cost like essentially college tuition to be able to be a part of that. That would benefit our entire society, and it's actually it's continuously detrimental to our society to not have a stable system of childcare that's affordable and that's high quality.
Yeah. It has been so helpful to have your voices as a part of this experience. I want to thank all of you. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough, actually, for being here with us and sharing with us. I think, Alice, one of the things that you're saying is it's so important to listen to families. And we are so pleased that Strolling Thunder is an opportunity for family voices to come and be a part of what members of Congress are, of who members of Congress are hearing from, that you all came, you spoke with your members of Congress last year. We have another class that's coming in now, May 17th is Strolling Thunder. I am hoping that folks on Capitol Hill are preparing for those meetings with families and have another opportunity to hear something about the families and the experiences that you all are having now. Also keep an eye out for our giant baby monitor, which is going to be rolling through Capitol Hill on that day. I think that will be really fun. No one can tell us better than you all about what it's like out there. And we just can't thank you enough for being here with us today. I'm going to turn it back over to Miriam.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And thank you, Alice, Devaney, and Pascal, for sharing your powerful stories with us, your insights, your leadership on behalf of your families and all of our nation's babies and families. And thank you, all of you, for joining us. The 2022 yearbook affirms that families with infants and toddlers continue to struggle in the absence of a strong national policy agenda that prioritizes their economic security, health, and early learning needs. As we close, I want to end with something that Alice has shared with us, because I couldn't say it any better than Alice. If you've never experienced the frustration of having to choose between keeping your job, paying for childcare, or putting food on the table, try to remember the thousands of families that are in that situation. Families need to be heard. They need to feel prioritized and not forgotten by our nation's leaders. We hope that you take what we have shared today and use it to think babies and inform future policy and advocacy work. And please stay connected to 0 to 3. We have so many exciting things coming up this month. As you've just heard, on May 17th, many of our families will participate in our National Strolling Thunder event, where we'll have families of babies from all 50 states and DC meet with their members of Congress to cry out for change and to push for policies that support strong, healthy development. I also want to remind you that if you have any questions about the data or really anything that we presented today, please reach out to us at policycenter@0to3.org. You see all of those links there. Again, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. I'm thankful to the Congresswoman and the Senator, and to our Amanda and our incredible family panel. I hope you all have a great afternoon. And for all of the mamas out there, I hope you have a wonderful Mother's Day. Thanks.